Hey, what's up, everyone? Thank you for joining me for another YouTube video discussion. And if you have anything that you want to say in regards to the discussion, feel free to leave it down in the comments beneath this video. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Um, but let's just go ahead and get into today's video, and then we'll announce maybe some channel stuff at the end of the video. So, I've been having a few videos that I've been wanting to make lately, right? And it's been kind of hard to sort of decide which one I wanted to make. That's been one of the biggest problems, right, when it comes to this channel is what do I want to talk about that maybe nobody else is. At first I was going to do a Lamo, but then I decided, you know what, enough people have talked about that on other channels. I'm really indifferent about it, so I don't really want to talk about it. But having recently finished Echoes of Wisdom, I wanted to talk about that. And we're just going to go ahead and preface this now that if you have not finished Echoes of Wisdom, that there will be spoilers for the game. So come back to the channel later and again leave your thoughts in the comments down below once you finish it and you've had a chance to sort of digest the game. But having finished it just yesterday and having some time to think about it, I wanted to talk about my overall feel about Echoes of Wisdom, and also maybe where it might fall in the timeline, because this is a very interesting game that can change a few things based upon where it falls in the timeline, right? Now, for those who don't know, just a little bit of history, Zelda, of course, has three timelines. There's one main timeline, and then Ocarina of Time explains that it splits three ways based upon how the game goes down, right? Either Ganon wins, and we get what's known as a downfall timeline, or Link goes back and lives his childhood, or he goes back and tells Zelda about what happens and all that stuff. So yeah, three different timelines, and there's been debates about where certain games fall on the timeline. So every time we get a new Zelda, there's always a discussion about where does this game fall in the timeline, right? I think it falls in the downfall timeline, mostly because that is the most prevalent location for Ganon. What do I mean by that? Well, as you know from seeing, I'm sure, gameplay of the game, we have a Ganon that's in a boar form and has a cape. And that looks more like what he looks like when it comes to games like Link to the Past that's in that downfall timeline, right? And some people have said that this game is a direct sequel, although Link Between Worlds is a direct sequel to Link to the Past, and some have said it's a direct sequel to Link's Awakening, which I believe is also in that same timeline. Like, that Link has done a lot. But somehow I have this feeling that if it is in the downfall timeline, it's towards the beginning. For a few reasons that we'll go into. Because one, it's very weird, right? But we're also going to have to maybe shake this theory up later by something that is sort of revealed midway through the game. So, as you've all seen from the beginning intro, and even from the, I think the initial gameplay footage on the trailer for the game, is that Link gets trapped in a rift after defeating Ganon and sort of semi-rescuing Zelda. And then the whole point of this game is that Zelda then needs to decide what's going on with these rifts, decides that she finds out that she can go in and close the rifts and save Hyrule, and along the way also decides that she needs to then save Link because Link is the hero of Hyrule and stuff like that. But what makes it interesting, and one of the reasons why I think it might take place earlier in the timeline, some people have stated that they think it's the very beginning of the timeline, like before Skyward Sword, and I don't think that that's the case, because Skyward Sword seems like the definitive beginning, right? Like, there's no Hyrule in Skyward Sword. It's literally up in the sky. Then by the end of Skyward Sword, of course, the island crashes down, and I'm guessing that island then becomes what's known as Hyrule Castle / Village, and there you go. So I don't think it's before, because there's already a Hyrule Castle, and there's already a king and a democracy and all that stuff that's set up. So I don't think that it falls in that particular location. But what I will say is that I think it does fall somewhere in the beginning of a timeline. Now it's possible that it doesn't, but one of the reasons why I kind of feel like it does is because nobody knows anybody, right? Like when they're just like, hey, this hero in green came. This, like, no one refers to him as Link. It's not until later on in the game when Zelda is, going to these different towns and like, oh yeah, you look just like Link, and Link is this person, blah blah, and you kind of piece it. She kind of pieces it together that, oh, you mean the person in green who saved me. So yeah, she doesn't know who Link is, and it seems like from my experience, granted, she doesn't always know who Link is, right? Like, I think Twilight Princess, she doesn't know who Link is and stuff. But there's been a lot of times, especially when you get in games like Link to the Past, where she calls him by name. So she obviously has some semblance of who he is, right? And has some idea of who he is. Even if it's just because of her infinite wisdom, and so she's telepathic and can reach out and all that stuff. But also another reason why is because, again, of a spoiler that comes on later in the game that we'll get to. So hopefully this all starts to make sense as we get to it. I'm trying to go through the game in chronological order, that the best that I can think of. Right, but also nobody knows Ganon, right? They just refer to him as that blue monster. And it's, again, not until halfway through the game, when you face him again, that he reveals himself. He says, I am Ganon, Prince of Darkness, or whatever it is he calls himself. I blah, 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 blah. He goes through this monologue. So then they refer to him as Ganon. They call him that. So it seems like it's something that happens before Link to the Past and before, some of the mainline games. Because even in Zelda 2, Ganon has that boar form. We never see him as Ganondorf, right? So it's interesting to me that all the other ones, they call him Ganon, they know who he is, but in this one they don't. So it almost seems like it's the beginning of that downfall timeline. At least that's how I feel. Now, I know that technically, and here's where we start getting into spoilers, so go ahead and just end the video here if you want. Give you some time. That should be enough time. For those of you who did stay, we are going to go into spoiler territory now, starting from the second half of the game, where a lot of stuff starts to get revealed to you. So, after your fight with Ganon the second time, you find out that he's really an echo. He wasn't the real Ganon. So, he's dead? So maybe it takes place between Zelda 1 and Zelda 2, but again, in Zelda 1, he's referred to as Ganon, and almost like people know who he is. So it does seem like it takes place before the original Legend of Zelda. I don't know. But what's interesting about it is, do we have an opportunity here with the introduction of the true villain of this game to sort of retcon Zelda's history, right? Because, again, spoilers, I feel like I just need to say this many times because I don't want people blasting me or saying, oh, you ruined the game and all that stuff. If you haven't played it, please go play it. It's not that long of a game. It took me about a week to finish, and I was really, really trying to draw out the gameplay. But with that being said, the true character of the game is called Null. And Null is basically a void kind of like creature that loves darkness and doesn't want anything to be in existence, right? It's kind of hard to explain, but there was sort of a point where the goddesses came into creation and started to create stuff, and Null didn't like this and wanted to just basically destroy all life. So we have a possible predecessor to Demise. Because while Demise set up the curse that basically had Link, Zelda, and a potential evil come into power, so there's always a wisdom, there's always a power, and there's always, courage. Could Null possibly be a predecessor? But then that's weird because you can't have Null, who would have created an echo of Ganon, unless, of course, he somehow knows of all wielders of power and those who will come and threaten Hyrule, unless he's somehow aware of all of that throughout all of time, when we haven't even had Ganondorf yet, and we know Ganondorf comes as a result of Demise's curse. So I don't think it's in that pre-split timeline as some people say that it would have. I still think it's in the Downfall timeline. Another reason why I think it's in the Downfall timeline is when you get to a point in the game where Noah decides, you know what, my ruse is done. You know, there's something that he's doing that sort of is tricking Zelda into doing what it is she's doing. And again, I don't want to reveal too much because I feel like I've already revealed too much by saying about Noah. But that's one of those kind of things that you find out before the end of the game, about halfway through, depending upon which second half of the dungeons you do. If you do a certain dungeon, then the goddess that you encounter will tell you the story of Noah. So it's not that big of a spoiler. Like, it's 3/4 into the game, so it's quite a ways in. But it's not the latter quarter of the game. But something does happen in the latter quarter of the game, where you then have to end up basically going after Noah, and you decide that you also want to save Link along the way. And when you do, you get an interesting final dungeon where you and Link work together, blah, blah, blah. But what's interesting about it is that the Triforce is real in this. And that's not something that usually happens. Like, I seem to remember, I think in the adult timeline is where it takes place, where you have a manifestation of the Triforce. Like, Ganondorf lifts up his fist and you see the power one light up, and like Link looks at his hand and the courage one shows up. So it's kind of there, it's representative, because it's, again, it's a metaphor that transcends all time and transcends all of, you know, everything. And even in the game, it doesn't even have a name yet, which is the reason why I feel like that's the reason why it takes place earlier in the timeline, is because if you think about other games, what do they call the Triforce in A Link to the Past? They call it the Triforce. What do they call it in other games? They say, hey, here's the Triforce of courage that you have to get from Zelda 2, right? So it's, and even then, they say in the original Zelda game, she took the Triforce of wisdom and broke it into multiple pieces. So it seems like it's the kind of thing that, again, is predating, because they don't call it the Triforce in this. They call it Prime Energy, and they talk about how it is this huge energy that can just, you know, do anything. It can destroy anything and all that stuff. And it's also representative of the goddesses. And that's the reason why when it's actually physically touched, it then splits. It goes to the person. Zelda gets hers, Link gets his, and then the person who is representing the villain at that time gets the power inside of them. So then, yeah. So it's something that's physical in this game. And also kind of not physical, because then it goes inside them. But you get it. It's not called the Triforce, is what I'm saying. So again, it seems like it predates the other Zelda games that are on the Downfall timeline, and I feel like it's a Downfall timeline for those reasons, right? The fact that we have a physical Triforce that I don't recall in the other two timelines it being a real thing. I could be wrong on that, because there are some Zelda games that I still have not played yet, so it's very much possible. But from what I recall from games like Twilight Princess, I don't remember 100% if it was in Wind Waker. It could have been. You know, all those games that are in those other two timelines, which actually aren't a lot. There's a lot of games that seem to take place in the Downfall timeline, which is very weird, but also kind of makes sense. I don't recall the Triforce being a physical thing. Like Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, all that stuff. I don't remember it. It may have been there, and maybe my memory just isn't recalling properly. So again, all apologies if I'm incorrect. But I do remember it predominantly being in the Downfall timeline, because it was mentioned Zelda, Zelda 2, Link Between Worlds, and I think, Link to the Past, and I believe Link Between Worlds also talked about it also. Because there was also the inverse Triforce, where it was like cowardice, you know, something like that, some opposite. So, but what do you guys think? Do you think that I've kind of caught on to something here, that Echoes of Wisdom takes place before, and that we then have an established history and an established knowledge after that of Ganon. But it has to take place somewhere in the middle, because while it makes sense for all of that, it's weird that there is an echo of Ganon, which means that in order for an echo to be made, it has to take something that already exists, right? You can't make a Lionel echo unless you defeat an echo, or you defeat the Lionel and then you capture it, right? When you take on the various echoes of Link, to get the abilities that you get in this game, you have to defeat that echo, right? So the fact that there is an echo of Ganon means that he had to have existed. So maybe it is after Zelda, or maybe after Zelda 2, because then you'd have all three pieces of the Triforce. But then again, Zelda is one of those weird series, right? They're sort of canonically connected, but also not connected. Like there's their own experiences. So this could just be its own thing. Or it could be like most games, where there's hundreds of thousands of years that have passed, and so the knowledge of Ganon is no longer known. So they just refer to him as that blue monster, because hey, we don't know what the heck this thing is. But if you get something like in Breath of the Wild, where this huge calamity came and basically destroyed almost all of Hyrule, and they referred to it as Calamity Ganon, there's some knowledge of who the heck he was, right? So I would think that if it took place between Zelda games, like between Zelda 2 and Link's Awakening, for example, that there would be knowledge of who Ganon was. Or maybe this is this kind of thing where, again, Null just knows the history and is using that. And it also presents an interesting theory that maybe I'll go into in another video, of all the bosses that we keep repeatedly facing in other Zelda games. Are they all just echoes of Null? Kind of interesting thought, considering the fact that you do face some classic Zelda bosses in this game. And if you keep thinking about how, like, oh, you know, Goma keeps showing up, I think showed up in Twilight Princess and in Ocarina of Time, then it's just like all these possible echoes that are just being recreated by Null. So again, Null's been around, because we know Null's been around since basically the time with the goddesses. So has he just been chilling this whole time, trying to, you know, get his hands on whatever he needs to get his hands on? But then in Ocarina of Time, they call it the Triforce. So I don't know. It's kind of an interesting gray area here. I just think that it's probably just its own self-contained game with this history of stuff that the royal family knows about, but they don't know really what to call it. Who knows? But I'm going to try to wrap this this video up at about the 20-minute mark. So I do apologize for the long-winded rant. There was just a lot of stuff that I wanted to get off my head, you know, get out of my head and just get out here into video form and sort of get you guys' opinions on it. But at the end of the day, I'm just one guy rambling on the internet who just happens to like Zelda and is probably thinking too much about it. But getting into some other news, though, there might be some changes to the channel, such as possibly updating the name. Just because even though I am still a retro geek who likes playing the older style games, it doesn't really seem to fit anymore. You know, it's kind of weird calling myself the retro geek when I'm also playing modern day consoles. So might update it, but you know, if I do, don't fret, it's still me, and I'm still gonna give you the same video content, probably just like this with headphones. Or I might just keep this channel the exact same. Who knows? I'm kind of lazy like that. But I do hope that you guys like the video content. Feel free to leave a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe if you're new to this channel, because I try to give you video content like this all the time. But even if you don't do any of that, I do hope that you guys have yourself a wonderful rest of your week, and I will talk to you in the next video. Have a good one.